Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all a work in progress. I'm Rob Commodore. I'm your host. I'm also the author of the book Better Than You Think and co-author of the book Next Level Your Life with Kyle Wilson and several other authors. So today I have with us Greg Chaplain from Norfolk, because he had to correct me. I say Norfolk, and most people say that, but it's Norfolk, Virginia. And
Virginia Beach. It's easier.
Okay, let's go to that route. Virginia Beach, Virginia. I met Greg through the real estate community I'm part of. Greg's been a realtor for 20 years. He's been married to his high school sweetheart for 33 years and with her 7 years prior to that. So I got to tell my wife this story because it took me 5 years to get married. It took him 7. So now I got somebody I can fall back on and for support when I need it. So he's got 2 girls, 2 young ladies. Well, they're in the 20s now. And he's just an awesome dude. He walks that faith with Christ. And he's a great leader in the real estate business. He's going to share a little bit of that story. So, Greg, thank you for being here and welcome to the show today.
Well, Rob, it's a pleasure to be with you, really. I've been a fan of the podcast, honestly, since you started it. And some of the things that you brought up early in your podcast were some of your mastermind groups and things like that. And I live that realm as well. So I learned a lot from listening to your podcast. So thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. In fact, I'll before we get into some of your story, I'll just kick that off real quick. You have something similar to the mastermind group I have. So I have a mastermind group myself and 2 others, and it was 4 at one time, but again, it's 3 now. And Greg's part of a group called the Commonwealth Group, and it's 6 of you, right?
6 of us, right? From Massachusetts, Virginia, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania, which are all Commonwealth states.
And that's thus the name Commonwealth Group.
Thus the name.
You know what? I didn't know that. I didn't know why. I didn't know the reason behind the name. That's great. So Greg, before we go into the other stuff, I think it's cool that you have 6 of you. You're all over 3 of you from Virginia, but you're spaced out.
We are.
What is the Commonwealth Group, and how do you guys make it work, being located in different areas of the country?
Well, that's great. We actually came together organically. In like 2016. So we all come from the real estate space, but most of us were in different capacities when we first met, meaning, some people were agents who are now broker owners. But the point being is that we all came together through the real estate space, and we made a commitment that we would retreat once a year, and like in the month of October, and that we would start it off by just like reading a book or something like that collectively, and going into a retreat and having basically just a synergy meeting. It was just a couple of guys getting together with some common experiences to discuss growth, to discuss leadership, to discuss whether it was a book or a series or some training module that we had taken advantage of, and that we would discuss that. The other part of it was, and why we did it in October, was that we would present our next calendar year's business plan to each other, and quite frankly, poke holes in each other's business plans, which is, you go in there and you can write something down on a piece of paper that you're like, yeah, I'm going to double my business next year. Well, when 5 other guys are looking at you going, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? And show me where you're going to grow. And that's when you get called on the carpet to be able to not only present it, but believe it. And present it in a way that they believe it, because so we kind of developed that relationship of kind of the iron sharpens iron philosophy of, look, we can all get better if we work together. From there, it morphed into the fact that we started talking very regularly. We started a Zoom call like in 2016, long before Zoom was a thing. We would do a Zoom call on every Thursday morning. And we still do that today. So we're talking with each other every week. We're talking with each other on the phone or text every day. And these guys have become my brothers. They've become my trusted advisors. They've become my board of trustees. They've become, guys that I can count on. We've taken each other through many things, whether it's personal, whether it's spiritual, whether it's business, whether it's finance. Anything that we need to get into, we can get into with each other, and it's a safe place. It's a safe space.
Yeah, and I've seen you guys. I've been around you guys. I obviously know you from the real estate community, and I've been actually I spent a few days with you on one of your year-end trips
That's
or
right.
one of your
Western
Commonwealth
Maryland.
trips.
Yep.
Yes, yes, Western Maryland up at Deep Creek, and I think that if I could say from the outside looking in, there's definitely a certain love, a special love amongst these guys. And like Greg said, they're his brothers and his trusted advisors and whatnot. So I know you guys call each other out. I know there's probably a little bit of the button of the heads.
Oh yeah.
But I also know there's a lot of love for each other. And I know you guys are there for each other every step of the way. Is that
There
right?
is. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of empathy. There's a lot of leaning into each other because we go through stuff, right? It's called life, and we're there for each other. And it doesn't matter what it is or what we need to talk about. It's a safe space to do that. And man, it's been pivotal to my growth, my career, these last 10 years of my business have benefited greatly.
Yeah, for anybody listening, because at the end of the show, Greg could give us contact information. It's just I can't emphasize how, like you said, you used the word pivotal. It is to have a group of people, whether it's a group of ladies together, a group of guys together, whether it's a co-ed group, but a group of accountability people. Because like I said, I've been part of 3 and 4 person thing. We've been doing ours for 12 years, and I would say the same thing. It's been pivotal in my growth, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. So just for all the listeners out there, I can't emphasize how important it is to find somebody, because we can all say we can hold ourselves accountable, but when you put the pedal to the metal or the foot to the pavement and somebody's holding you accountable, there's a little more pressure, if you will, to get stuff done.
Yeah. The guys hold me capable.
I love that. Yeah.
If I put something out there and I say, this is what I'm going to do, they know I've got the capacity to do it, and they can hold me capable.
Yeah, and I like that you said that. I heard that the first person, Kristen Tabbert, I heard it from her the first time. And she said, instead of holding each other accountable, hold yourself capable. I love that.
Right.
Love that. So great stuff. So I know I got off on a tangent right away there. So Greg, one of the things I want to chat with you today about, when I first met Greg, I know he's a spiritual guy. I've been to these events, and there's maybe 10, 12, 15, 4 people at a table for lunch or whatnot. And Greg's always the guy that says the prayer before the meal. Greg, lead us in prayer today. So Greg, I'd like to hear a little bit about your walk in faith and how you got to where you are.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Massachusetts, down near Cape Cod and southeast Massachusetts. Grew up in a Catholic family, Archdiocese of Boston. We were regular attenders. We, even when we were traveling, we would find mass somewhere, and so that was very important to me growing up. That family unit, that family faith walk together, was very important to me. Through all of that, I thought we had things pretty figured out. But as I grew through my teens into my 20s, went off to college, probably like the majority, I drifted a little bit. And I was in my young 20s when a Christian businessman took the time to sit down with me and kind of talk to me about grace and salvation. And I made a decision right then to complete that mission and to accept Christ as my Savior and start a new faith walk, not anti any denomination. I'm just saying something changed, and it became all important. Now, at the time, I was engaged to be married to my high school sweetheart. We had met in high school. Obviously, I went off to college 2 years before her, and then she came up to college for 2 years, and then I graduated, and then we had to wait for her to graduate before we got married. But I knew a month after I started dating her, I was going to marry her. We just had to wait 7 years to get schooling done, and so we did that.
I got to interrupt you, Greg. I got to interrupt you. So, was schooling the excuse? Was it one of you didn't want to do it?
No. That was the excuse. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. No, it was schooling. It was 100% schooling. So no, we wanted to finish college, have that experience before getting married, and we did so, and had just had we were engaged at the time that I got saved, so it became important to us as a couple, and so we started our faith walk then. Found a church, plugged in, a Bible believing church, and just plugged in, non-denominational, and just plugged in.
That's good. So we talked offline, and you said of all places you met this Christian fellow at a convention.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, may have been in Baltimore, as a matter of fact. It was
Oh, was
it
it?
was it was either that or Richmond, one of the two. But yeah, I was at a convention. I just met this guy, and we connected, and he saw something, and he said, I got to tell this guy about the gospel, and he did. And I had known the gospel. I had read and been exposed to it, but I had never been exposed to the grace and the salvation of a one-on-one connection with Jesus.
Yeah. So I got to say, so we talk about a convention. So it wasn't a religious convention. It wasn't a
No, it
spiritual
was a
convention.
business convention. Yeah,
It was an Amway
it
convention,
was an
right?
Amway convention. Yeah, yeah. I was just going there to learn more about business.
It's funny how we meet people, because like we're part of this Buffini community, and we go to these conventions, these seminars
Yeah,
all the time. And I can tell you, great, from the first time I went, I've always felt it, especially the first peak I went to back in 2003. I've always felt these things as spiritual events for me. I was always looking for spirituality there, because I knew there were people there that had that in them, and it was just a
right.
certain, I guess, a feeling in the air, or a certain thing about these people that there was just a connectivity piece that you didn't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, look, the Buffini organization, Buffco, they're not shy about putting it out there. It's one of the 5 circles that they coach to. So, unlike having a business coach or a finance coach, one of the things that I admire most about what Brian has done with his company is their coaches coach the whole person. They coach the business, the finance, spiritual, the family, and the personal. And it's they're not leaving one out. Now, maybe most of our conversations drift more towards business and financial, because let's face it, that's our occupation. But I've had conversations with my coach, quite frankly, for the last 10 or so years, that we don't really talk much about business. We're talking about kingdom things. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about anxiety. We're talking about burnout. We're talking about all these things. Yeah, they're all interrelated, and that's why the logo is what the logo is, where the circles all intertwine, is because any success or any failure in one of those circles is going to affect the others. We've all seen that in our businesses. We've all seen that in our families. We've seen it in our communities, where someone could have a health issue, and it affects them financially. It affects them spiritually. It affects them, in many, many ways.
Now, Greg, would you say, I totally agree with that, that one failure in one of the circles can affect the others. But if we flip the coin on that, could one success?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Others?
Growth in any one area affects the rest.
Yeah.
That's why it's very important to always be on a personal growth mentality, right? Where if I can continue to grow the personal side and continue to grow me as a better leader, as a better practitioner, as a better, whatever, fill in the blank here. If I can become better there, it is going to affect my finances. It is going to affect my business. It'll affect my family. It'll affect my spiritual walk.
Yeah.
And, maybe I can do more in my spiritual walk if I have more finances. So, not to say that one, have to have finances to be spiritual, but I'm just saying there is growth in all circles when there's growth in any one of the others.
And we do know, I say this jokingly, we do know that if there's problems financially, the spiritual circle will definitely increase.
That's true too.
Lord, bring me the manna from heaven,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, hey, Greg, a couple things here. You mentioned it, like you said, you were saved at 23, and I, like when you say I was saved at 23, I know you talked about that you met the guy, but what does that mean? I was saved at 23.
It means I made a decision to have a personal relationship with Christ, and period. That's what it meant. Others refer to it as born again. Others refer to it as saved by grace. Whatever it was, I felt the burden. I felt the infiltration of the Holy Spirit, and I felt the burdens disappear. And to say, well, because that life has been perfect since, heck no. I mean, that's being a Christian doesn't mean we're sinless. It just means hopefully we sin less. That's all it means. So we still have to live life. You still, things come at you all the time that you have to navigate. But I made a decision to have that personal relationship. So I had one-on-one connection with my Lord and Savior through prayer, through meditation, through through a faith walk that I didn't have prior to that.
Yeah, I love that. I love you sharing that. And I think it's one of the things that drew me to you is that I saw that in the conversations we've had, it just kept coming out of you. And then you made a comment about you understood what grace and salvation was. What does it mean to have grace or be given grace to you?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's nothing you can earn. There's not enough works. There's not enough anything to earn it. It was given by Christ to us through grace because we don't deserve it, but He gave it to us anyway. And it was the opportunity to come through Him to the Father that, He said Himself, He's the only way through, and nobody can go to the Father except through Him. So I made that decision to utilize my relationship with Christ to be linked to the Father.
That's great.
Being the fact that we're human and we're unholy, we can't even be in the presence of the Father except through the blood of Christ.
Yeah, and we need those graces to I guess continue that walk in faith. And maybe I'm looking at it this way: like if I know those graces are coming and they're out there, I feel like, and maybe this is wrong, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it's like, don't you feel like you can walk more confidently in that walk when you know those graces are there? Not in a presumptive way, but just it's there.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that the knowledge of being saved is a powerful thing, and no, not in a cocky way, not in a hey look at me way, but in a peace in the spirit way of just understanding who I am, but more importantly, whose I am.
Oh, I love that. You're saying some profound stuff here, man. I love that. Sinless, but sinless, and now whose I am. I like that. Good stuff. So great. So for the audience out there, Greg's a real estate agent. He's been in it 20 years, like I said. He runs a high level successful team. And I mean, and I don't, it's not from a braggadocious standpoint, but you put out what, several hundred units a year, correct?
Yeah, for the last 5 years, we've averaged over 365 units a year and over $100 million in real estate for the last 5 years.
So if you've heard that correctly, everybody, that's one house per day, correct?
Exactly right. Even holidays and weekends.
But you're not selling a house on Christmas, or maybe you are. I don't know.
No, we're not closing them on Christmas because everybody's closed. But so we got to double up on the Monday through Friday stuff because over one a day on average.
Yeah. So
obviously it wasn't always that way. We grew to that point.
And was there an exponential growth, or was it a slow burn, a slow growth, or was it all of a sudden bang, it just clicked? Or
yeah, I think like any other business, there's a book out there, and the author just went right at Norman Vincent Peale, I think, called Peak to Peak.
Okay.
It's a book called Peak to Peak, and Brian talks about this. But basically, if you're in the valley and you climb up to the next highest peak, well, when you get to that next highest peak, you can see a higher mountain off in the distance. But to get there, you have to go down the one you're on and then go up the next one. And then you see the higher mountain. So you've got to go down from the second highest mountain up to the third. So business, is a constant cycle of plateaus and rises and plateaus and maybe some dips. So no, it wasn't like an exponential from point A to point B. What it was a growth. So here's how it was. So I started real estate in 2005. I started my career on a team. I was a team agent. And this is 2005. There weren't a lot of teams out there,
right?
But it wasn't a word that was used a lot in real estate. But because I had spent 13 years in the wine business, basically building sales teams from 4 people up to 250 people with layers of management and all that stuff. When I got into real estate and I heard the word team, that resonated with me. It was something I understood. I knew how to grow teams, so I joined a team. And it was a very well-run team. And I learned a ton. My learning curve was very exponential because I was surrounded by, a group of people, about 12 to 16 people that were just killing it. And I was fortunate enough to be in the room and I could learn from experience. Then from there, we grew to a place where I co-owned the team. We started a second office. I ran that. And then in 2009, the partnership just wasn't working out. So I left the company and I went to a regional company called the Real Estate Group. And I started Real Estate Home Team in 2009. And So the team that I own now started in 2009. So we're now in our, 15th, 16th year.
Yeah.
And so we started with 4 of us, and we grew a little bit, and we got our transactions up to about 120 transactions a year. And we had one good year. We jumped up to 150, but we were really averaging about 123. And then I had some turnover. So I experienced one person moved away, another person, it was time for them to rotate off. I had another person that rotated off, and then I had another person that just wasn't making the cut. They just weren't transacting. And so I went from, a team of 6 down to a team of 2. And the other person beside me had been with me like 6 weeks.
Huh.
So it gave me a chance to look in the mirror, analyze my value proposition. What is it that I bring as a team leader to the table for what I'm asking in compensation, right? So it gave me a chance to reanalyze that. We added a few things. I added a staff person at that point. We had never had one before. So we were doing 120, 150 transactions. We didn't have an admin. But we had systems and processes that I had these things in place so that even though the agents were doing the heavy lifting, we had systems and processes in place that they were efficient, they were speedy, and they didn't spend a lot of time doing paperwork. We got it out of our hands to the next phase. So then I brought on an assistant, and we started growing from there. And that was the group that, it started with, I'd bring on an agent or 2 every year, and 1 or 2 would leave, and I'd bring on 2 or 3, and 1 or 2 would leave, and it's normal growth. But I did have a run there where our average, most average agents on a team last about 1.5 years before they rotate off, and we had people that had been with us 6, 7, 8, in some cases 9 years before they rotated off. So my concept was I wanted to build a team that if I wasn't the team leader, I would want to be part of the team. I would want to be on the team. So that was my job as a team leader, to provide that level of value and a compensation model that was, commensurate. And so that's what we did. So we grew from 2014. At that time, we were doing about 100. We dropped from 150 down to like 112 transactions because of the turnover. And then we started growing, and we went to 111, and we went to 184, and then 223, and then 312, and then 369, and 368. So as I was bringing people on, I was able to create enough volume. I was able to create, I was the rainmaker, still am. And I was able to bring enough things in that I could spin off some business to the team agents, but I also taught them how to work by referral and generate their own business. And so our environment was, very inclusive. Our environment was very, fair, we would say, because that's why people would stay for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, is because they obviously think it's fair. And every year I'd ask them the question, are you going for another year? Is it time to rotate off? And, every year they'd be like, no, I want to come back. So then, so that's how we grew all the way up to, 2021, where we did over 400 transactions. And that was the first year we did over $100 million, and we backed it up again in 2022.
That's amazing. So did you desire to be a leader, or did it just like kind of fall in your lap?
I always wanted to be a leader.
Yeah.
I can go back to, we can, you remember things when you're a kid, and I was always a leader. But I wanted to be a leader by example, not position.
Right. Okay.
I wanted to be a true leadership, not just, because my business card's bigger than your business card, I'm the boss and I'm the leader. I learned in the wine business, I learned in real estate when I was on my first team, how to lead from the middle of the pack. When you're racing dogs, the lead dog is always the one that's guiding the other dogs, and follow me, everybody, get on my 6, let's go in this direction, like a dog sled is. But on a dog sled, there's leaders on that team that are in the middle of the pack, and they're barking or whatever it is they're doing to encourage the ones in front of them to keep going. And I mean, this is scientific. I mean, Canadian geese are the same way. The reason they honk when they're flying is to encourage the lead goose to keep, because they're the ones that are breaking the wind. They're the ones with all the wind resistance. And so one goose can, I've seen a study where one time where it says, one goose can fly about, however many miles a day. But if you get 10 Canadian geese in a V formation, it's like 10 times as much.
Because they're drafting. There's a draft.
They're drafting, exactly.
Yeah.
And they rotate who's up front.
Yeah.
Just like NASCAR, the next man up, boom, that goose goes, the other goose falls back and tucks in behind and basically getting a free ride at that point. And the reason they're honking is to encourage. And dogs do the same thing. So, but you can lead from the middle of the pack.
Greg, I got to sit here and say it is. I don't know that I've ever heard that, and I think that's a phenomenal philosophy, right? And I think it's a humbling place to be as well. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Humbling being what? In the middle of the pack?
Yeah, being middle pack to lead from the middle of the pack.
I think it's an honor. I think it's an honor to be in the middle of the pack, but also to show leadership by being in the middle of the pack, by edifying the leader, by encouraging my peers.
Yeah, you're leading by doing that.
By doing that, naturally, right?
That's awesome. So obviously you're in leadership position, and through Buffini, some of these conferences, you've been on the leadership panel, if you will, right. And a lot of people look up to you. And so I think it was a year or so ago. I mean, you're cruising 400 deals, and I don't think I've never seen Greg come from a place of ego, right, or arrogance. I've never seen that. And then the bottom kind of, and you can share it, the bottom kind of fell out. If you want to explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, in late 22, what happened? Interest rates started rising, and buyers started tapping the brakes a little bit. And by the time we got to early 2023, not only were buyers tapping the brakes, but sellers were tapping the brakes because, I'm sitting in my house that I kind of like, but I've got a 3.5% interest rate. So I don't want to sell my house and buy the house that I really want for a 7% interest rate. So we all experienced this across the nation in real estate, where in my opinion, there's a ton of pent up demand right now because buyers weren't able to, get what they want. Some of them had missed out during the 2020, 2021, 2022 frenzy. And so there were pent up demand, but there wasn't enough inventory. And we're still suffering from that in our industry. So as we got into 2023, our team's volume was down. I mean, guess what? Just about everybody was, right? So nationally, in 2023, we had the least amount of homes sold since 1993, when there was 4.2 million Americans, Americans. Now there's 565 million. And we had the least amount of homes sold. Everybody's felt it. It's been reported on by multiple sources, many prognosticators talking about what's going to happen next. Well, we felt it, and we were down about 20%. And I learned something from Brian Buffini that I used to use actually in a tour that I used to do of a school that my kids went to, a Christian school. And what he taught me was, when you take an orange and you squeeze it, what comes out? Orange juice. Why?
Because that's
what's inside, right? So when a person is squeezed, what comes out is what's inside. When a market is squeezed, what comes out is what's inside. But when a person is squeezed, if someone's living in faith, if someone's living in abundance, if someone's living in gratitude, that's what comes out. If someone's living in scarcity, if someone's living in fear, if someone's living in, I can't make my bills, that's what comes out. And I had a group that, I had been coaching for a while that got squeezed. And then a couple ringleaders stood up and said, Pied Pipered, and said, okay, I'm leaving. Rob, you're coming with me, and we'll go do this together, because we got to get away from the team structure, because we're paying more than we could somewhere else. It's easy to sell cheap, right? It's easy to sell cheap.
Yeah.
And so they went from an organization that was a developmental team. In other words, my goal was to develop the best agents I could, not to hold them forever. I wanted to grow them up and move them out.
Yeah.
and because I need other good practitioners out there too. And then I could bring in the next one. I could grow them up and move them out. And these guys got, I can't think of the gentleman's name, but Brian did a podcast with him where we talked about the 5 levels of dependency.
I don't remember.
Okay, so you talked about, when you do something once for somebody, they're grateful when you do it. The second time, they anticipate you're going to do it. The third time, they expect it. The fourth time, they think they're entitled to it, and then that leads to dependency.
Right.
And so I had some agents that had got to a dependency on me and what I provided, but they didn't feel like it was worth the commissions split anymore. So they left to a pay nothing, get nothing, and they got nothing. What they got was a dose of perspective, because they went from an environment, and of course, all brokerages are the same, aren't they, Rob?
Yeah.
Don't we all? They're all the same, right? Leaderships are the same everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. Right.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
So maybe not. Maybe there are better leaders. Maybe there are better situations. I'm not saying my setup's better than anybody else's. I'm just saying, with my value proposition, the compensation model, if that's what you're looking for, if that's the way you'd like to do real estate, we're probably a good fit for each other.
Yeah.
If that's not the way you want to do real estate, you want to do other strategies, I'm not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I had 9 agents resign in June of 2023, which was about 85% of my production. So we took it on the chin a little bit. That was the second time. So it had happened in 2014, happened in 2023.
And that was, I remember you telling me, that was like a crushing blow to you, correct?
Well, yeah. As my coach explained to me, 2 of the things that I value because of my profile at a very high level, one is relationships, and number 2 is momentum.
Yeah.
And he said, so Greg, you're going to have to really protect, kind of like what we were talking about before, Rob. When someone has a setback in one of those 5 circles, it can affect the others. I've seen people lose their real estate business because they had a parent pass away, or a good friend pass away, or God help forbid, a child, or something, a health scare. I've seen them stop doing the things that they needed to do for their real estate practice. You've probably seen it too. And so Coach told me that. He goes, have you ever seen that happen? I'm like, yeah, I've seen it happen all the time. He goes, well, you just had 9 deaths in your family.
Yeah.
Because of the way you value relationships. You just had 9 deaths in your family, and you're going to feel that. And it's going to hurt. You're going to have to lean into your coaches. You're going to have to lean into your self-talk. You're going to have to lean into your, trusted advisors, your mastermind group, anybody who knows you for you, not just knows of you, but knows you. You lean into them, because you're going to feel this. And he was right. I went through the 5 stages of grief, in a couple of days, up to a week, 2 weeks. The second thing is the momentum. And so, we're cruising along 400 transactions a year, and all of a sudden 85% of the production walks out the door, and Coach says, yeah, you just went from a rocket ship to a sailboat. And I'm like, yep, I'm feeling that too. Now, we hadn't felt it yet. That came later.
Yeah.
Because we still had transactions in the pipeline. But about 90 days later, I was like, oh, baby, this is different. And it wasn't the first time I'd been there. I'd been there before, but This one was a deep cut. So the next thing when my coach told me that, the next thing I told him was, I said, Coach, I've built it before. I can build it again. And he says, you're right. And we went to work and started by calling influencers in the real estate industry, people that I knew and trusted, lenders, title companies. The owner of a title company here locally was the first person to call me. I called other realtors that I had good relationships with, whether they were with my brokerage or not. But people that there's agents out there that they're really not your competition. There are other good agents out there that I can trust. And I called them and I said, look, I'm looking for a referral. You know anybody that's maybe struggling with this market currently, and they're needing a little bit of air pumped into the balloon. You know what I'm about. You know what my leadership style is. You know what my team is capable of. I'm looking for some referrals, and I got some good referrals from agents, from lenders, from title companies, and I started interviewing. And I was very fortunate. I found 2 absolute rock stars right off the bat. Then I went through a little bit of a dry spell. So this is probably September, October, August, September, October. I was interviewing, but I wasn't finding what I was looking for, or I was finding what I was looking for, but they weren't willing to make a change. And that's when you start questioning yourself. You start questioning your value proposition. That little, you start developing a little, imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Am I really this leader? Am I really providing value for what I'm asking for in return? Because no one seems to be lining up to jump on it. And I talked to Coach about it. I had some heart to hearts with him, and I was like, dude, I'm struggling right now just from the standpoint of keeping my chin up. And he mentioned the imposter syndrome. He says, is it setting in? I said, yeah. He says, well, he goes, are you feeling it? I said, yeah. He goes, well, that right there just proves to me you're not an imposter. Because if you were an imposter, you wouldn't give a rip.
Yeah.
If you weren't the leader that I know you to be, you wouldn't care about what other people think. You wouldn't care about who's joining, who's not joining, if you were an imposter. He goes, so right there, that proves to me you're not. And I was like, okay, I can hang my hat on that. And I went back to work. And in November, I found 2 more agents that came on board that have been great. And I'm building momentum in their business right now. And then since then, I've hired 3 additional.
Yeah, so great. Thank you for sharing all that. And you told me earlier that you're at capacity now, which is awesome.
I am.
And so to go through that in 14, to go through it again last year, and people have seen you up on stage, and people know Greg is this guy, high producing guy, but you're also human too. And to know that we can all get, knocked down. And there's a couple of things in my mind here. One, it's the resiliency, that you had. And 2, it's like you had the conversation with yourself, you had the conversation with your coach, and I'm sure there was a conversation with God. And we're curious to know what that was.
Yeah. And listen, as I mentioned, when I became a Christian, I got plugged into a Bible believing church, and I got plugged into some small groups, and I got plugged into some men, and I listened and I read, and I, was excited about that. You hear about faith, you hope you've got it. You pray for it, right? You pray for it. And in 2004, I was one of 12 people in the wine business that did what I did across the country. I had $100 million budget, and it was a regional position and all that. And we bought out a company in December of 2024. We grew through acquisition and through internal development. And I had managed through 8 acquisitions with the company. And we bought a company in December of 2004 for like $1.6 billion, and I got let go in the process.
Wow.
And so January 2004, I remember my boss calling me saying, hey, drive over to the airport. I got to meet with you. And I turned to my wife and I said, well, I'll either come back with a job or without a job. And so I drove over there, got my severance package. And as I was driving back home, I was already calling and networking to get another position. And I hit the ground running. And several people in my community, whether it was families that our kids went to school together at the school, some church families, several of the men reached out to me. Hey, man, I heard what happened. Can I take you to lunch? And I'll never forget going to lunch with a guy. This was a couple of weeks after that. He's having lunch and he goes, man, I got to ask you something. He goes, something's really blowing my mind right now. And I said, what's that? He goes, you don't seem worried about this. And I'm like, I'm not. And he goes, I've never seen faith like that. If, most guys would be wallered up in the fetal position on the floor, wondering how they're going to provide for their family. I said, I don't have time for that, man. I was networking on the way home from the airport with my severance package, riding shotgun as I'm driving home. And So in the first 30 days, January of 2004, I interviewed 25 times in the first 30 days. That's how I hit the ground running. I was calling headhunters. I was calling people I knew, influencers, all the people I had served in the Mid-Atlantic, some people nationally, and had a couple of offers, but they were living in a place either I didn't want to go or doing something I didn't want to do. And so I got a little, greedy, if you will. And I'm like, no, I think I want to try to stay local. I want to try to keep my kids in the school they're in. We're getting roots down. And then in February, the phone stopped ringing because I had pretty much exhausted all my leads.
Uh-huh.
So I took real estate school for something to do so I wouldn't punch a hole in the wall. And I was pursuing 4 corporate opportunities at the time. So I had 4 good options. One was in the wine business, but it was something that I would have wanted to do. And the other 3 were outside of the industry. But I had everything that they were looking for. I had it on the resume and had success in it. And so I was pursuing those 4 things, taking real estate school just to keep myself occupied. And at the end of March, I passed the test. I got licensed in real estate. And the same week, all 4 corporate opportunities dried up.
Wow.
They either hired internal or they hired, someone else or whatever.
Right. So the real estate was a calling at that point.
Oh, I looked at the sky. I'm like, really? This is what you want me to do? Really? This is it, right? And so I made some phone calls, people I knew in the industry. I was like, I just got licensed. I'm looking for a place. And I ended up joining a team of a guy who he just ran a great team. He was a former police officer that got into real estate, done really well, and developed his team. And it was a great fit for me.
That's great. So I got to say, when you said you took the real estate classes just to keep yourself busy, so you wouldn't punch a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
I was thinking that you're my new Rocky. Remember, I think it was Rocky 6 when he says, he's talking to his son and he says, everybody gets knocked down in life. It's not about how hard you get hit and how hard you fall. It's about getting back up and how you respond.
Yeah.
And you've just told 3 different stories of how you responded to things instead of reacted. And so I'm going to call you my new Rocky.
But that was the moment when that guy told me that at lunch. That was the moment I kind of went, oh yeah, I really do have faith.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. I can actually feel it. My heart's at peace. I'm not worried. I know we're going to be fine. I mean, I was 39 years old. I had Nikki was a stay-at-home mom. We had 2 kids in private school, and I had just bought a house about 18 months early, so I had a brand new mortgage. So when I get into real estate, Rob, I didn't get in real estate to try it.
Yeah.
I get in real estate to do it.
Yeah.
And I treated it like a corporate 60-hour-a-week job, which was what I was used to working for the first 2 years. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I was sitting at the desk.
I got to ask you though, it's, you talk about this faith, you talk about, you felt it, you knew it. Is that something you're just born with, or can you teach it? Can you learn it? Talk to me about that.
I don't think I was born with it at all. I think it was something that grew through my faith walk. In fact, I know it was because I had heard the word faith. I had prayed for faith, but I really hadn't experienced faith. No one does until you have to.
Yeah.
Right? No one experience, I think I've got faith. But until you're tested at a point where you have to implement faith, that's when you know you either have it or you don't have it. And for me, it was kind of an awakening because someone else had to point it out to me. I was just doing my thing, man. I was just going after it, just kind of, trying to figure out what next was going to look like. And someone else had to point it out to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I really do. So when this happened in the last year, oh yeah, it hurt. Oh yeah, I had 9 deaths in the family, but I also had faith. And I also, and my coach knew it. He's like, when I said, James, I've built it before, I'll build it again. And he goes, yeah, you're right, you will.
I mean, when you said that, it takes me back. I remember years ago, I was age 34 years old, and I had, 34, and I was, had some money. I built my stock market account up pretty good, and I thought I was it, right? And I remember, and I got the story in my book, and I remember losing, like I had $450,000 that I'd lost in the stock market. And I remember walking in, tell my wife I thought I was going to get divorced, so she's going to kick me out or something at that point. And I told her, and she goes, I know you'll be back, honey. And I said to her, I said, look, I got two choices: stick my head in the sand like an ostrich or come out fighting. I said, I'm coming out fighting. And I think that's
exactly right.
Part of it. So you remind me of that as well. And I thank you for that. So you talked to me, like you said earlier, you said something to the fact, well, like you knew you got into real estate and you looked up in the sky and you said, really, this is what you want me to do? So talk to me about, because to me, that's a form of, okay, this is the will you're asking me to do. So is there like acknowledging or recognizing God's will and then taking action on that? You want to talk a little bit about
I'm
that?
a hard head, man. No, I didn't pre-plan for that. I didn't recognize when it was happening. It was just that every corporate opportunity I had dried up in the same week that I got licensed. It was just kind of like, it was a slap in the face is what it was. It wasn't something that I went out soul searching to find. It was like, blam, right in my lap is like,
yeah.
Okay, the only thing I got left, because everything else is dried up, is my new real estate license. I better make that work.
And Lord knows you did, right?
Yeah. Well, and so now, I'm making a month what I used to make in a year in the wine business.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's really incredible. So, Greg, I got to ask you, how much more you've been chiseled? You've been some blocks have been knocked off that piece of marble, right? How much more chisel you think God's got going for you?
I'm far from a work complete. I am a work in progress, and always will be. And Rob, where I'm focusing on being chiseled right now is I look at those 5 circles, and I look at every one of those 5 circles, and how can I be, 1% better in those 5 circles? How can I be 1% better for my family? How can I be 1% better in my finances? Just every single day. That's where the goals start. And so anyway, that's where my chiseling is coming from, is looking at those 5 circles and just trying to get 1% better in those as often as I can.
That's great. It's a great example to share with everybody, man. I don't know if there's a better way to end this than on that note right there. So, Greg, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, because who knows, it might be somebody in Norfolk that wants to be on your team, right? Or somebody wants to buy or sell a house down there, or somebody wants some encouragement from you.
That's right. That's right.
How would they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm at the Real Estate Group, which is a regional company. We're just 2 offices, about 230 agents here in the Hampton Roads area. My team is Real Estate Home Team. So I'm Greg at Real Estate Home Team. Real Estate Home Team is our website. You can always connect with us through there. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram as Real Estate Home Team. So we're 16th year as a team, which is a pretty long team. Where most teams don't last. 85% of teams don't last 2 years. We've had a nice run, and we're going to have another nice run. I've got the horses in the stall. We're just training them up as best we can.
You're ready to go for this
I'm ready.
Demand. Once it gets released, you're ready to go.
We're positioning ourselves because we know that's coming. Yes.
Greg, man, you're an inspiration to me. I'm sure there's been an inspiration to those who've listened to it today. And I'm grateful for you as a friend. I'm grateful to see you as a leader and learn from you from that. And I'm just, I'm happy that you're on here and honored you took the time to talk to us today.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I really respect what you're doing, and your podcast is amazing. It's a great listen.
Thank you for that, Greg. So everybody, it's been an honor to have Greg on the show. Until next time, let's go get chiseled.